Everybody, today the statement we're talking about is, I believe in the resurrection of the body. I'll read some from 1 Corinthians 15. So it is with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown is perishable. What is raised is imperishable. It's sown in dishonor, it's raised in glory. It's sown in weakness, it's raised in power. It's sown embodying the soul, it's raised embodying the spirit. If there's a soulish body, there's also a spiritual body. So we've already talked about the resurrection of Christ, what God did for Jesus, and what that means for us. And so this statement is about our final hope. And this statement about the resurrection of the body, I think the important part is the of the body. That's where we sometimes get tripped up a little bit. Because sometimes you'll hear people talk about this idea that the body is just a prison for the soul. And when you die, finally your soul gets to escape and float off to heaven, and you exist with God in that kind of intangible way, right? But that soul, the immaterial thing, that's the real you. That body is just something else. You've probably heard this at Christian funerals, but I got to tell you that view comes from Greek philosophy, not from Scripture. That's not the Judeo-Christian view. Greek philosophy thought that the material world is bad and we need to escape it. And unfortunately, that made its way into Christian thinking eventually. Now, unfortunately, part of the reason for that is bad translations. So in these verses that we heard, you may have some that talk about a physical body and a spiritual body. That's the wrong distinction, because it makes it sound like the distinction is between the material and the immaterial. That's actually what Paul is arguing against in the whole chapter. And so, as you may have heard in this translation, it's getting to the idea that a spiritual body is not a body composed of spirit, it's a body directed by the Spirit. Right now, our bodies are directed by our human souls. In the next life, they'll be directed by the Spirit of God. I mean, spiritual doesn't mean that it's not material. That's the whole point of the incarnation, that the Spirit of God was present in physical reality. The spiritual and material are not opposites. Right? The resurrection, the incarnation, they all point towards that reality. Spiritual gifts are embodied things that we do. And so this final resurrection that we're talking about, it affirms what's been true from the beginning, that God created this world, including embodied humans in it, and calls it very good. And so we don't need to leave them behind. We need to have them redeemed. And that's what Paul says will happen. What we will be in some sense is us, but also not. You know, he uses this metaphor, he talks about sowing, as in like sowing seeds. And I think that's a good metaphor, right? A nut, an acorn, contains everything that grows into the tree. The nut and the tree are not the same, and yet they are. It comes from it. It's still part of it. And so that's what our hope is, that what we will be after this is still us, but in a new way. You will still be you in the next life. How exactly? That's a mystery. I can't claim to understand it, but we can believe that we will be us because you, all of you, is made by God, is loved by God, and will be kept by God into eternity.